What legal loopholes restrict freedom of navigation operations? Imagine navigating through international waters, where laws and regulations are constantly evolving, creating complex challenges for maritime operations. Understanding the legal landscape that governs these movements reveals certain loopholes that can limit the effectiveness of freedom of navigation operations. These operations are designed to assert navigational rights and freedoms guaranteed by international law, particularly the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. However, various legal ambiguities and loopholes can restrict their scope and impact. One significant loophole stems from the differing interpretations of territorial waters and exclusive economic zones. According to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, a coastal state has sovereignty over its territorial waters extending up to 12 nautical miles from its baseline. Within this zone, the coastal state has complete authority, which can restrict the ability of foreign vessels to conduct navigational operations without permission. While international law permits innocent passage through territorial waters, some states interpret this provision narrowly, imposing restrictions or requiring notifications that can delay or complicate navigation. Another legal challenge involves the classification and enforcement of maritime boundaries. Disputes over maritime boundaries, especially in regions with overlapping claims, create legal ambiguities. For example, if a state claims a broader territorial sea or exclusive economic zone than recognized internationally, it can enforce restrictions that limit freedom of movement. These disputes often lead to legal confrontations or the deployment of naval vessels to assert rights, but they also open avenues for legal challenges that can delay or hinder operations. Furthermore, the concept of due regard in international law obligates ships to respect the rights of coastal states, which can be interpreted variably. Some nations argue that military vessels must adhere to certain procedures or notifications before conducting operations near their coastlines. This can lead to legal disputes over what constitutes appropriate conduct, especially if a vessel conducts a transit that a coastal state considers provocative or non-compliant. Additionally, the enforcement of international maritime law relies heavily on national legislation, which varies widely among countries. Some states have enacted laws that restrict or regulate military or civilian vessels' movements within their waters, creating legal hurdles for freedom of navigation operations. These national laws can include requirements for prior notification, restrictions on certain types of vessels, or limitations on the timing and routes of transit. Lastly, the existence of unilateral sanctions or embargoes imposed by individual nations or coalitions can serve as legal loopholes. These measures often restrict access to specific maritime routes or ports, complicating navigation and limiting operational freedom. While these sanctions are typically justified under national security or economic reasons, they can conflict with international legal principles, creating a complex legal environment for navigation. In summary, legal ambiguities surrounding territorial claims, maritime boundary disputes, varying national laws, and unilateral sanctions collectively form loopholes that can restrict the scope and effectiveness of freedom of navigation operations. These challenges highlight the importance of ongoing diplomatic efforts and international legal frameworks to ensure open and secure maritime navigation for all nations.